So I knew tonight was already going to be interesting. You should never know what you're going to get with me, with my passion, my emotions, and everything. But you probably know what to expect, so don't be surprised if I get choked up or whatever, like I already have. We're in chapter 9 of Matthew. We have just come off some questions about fasting. John the Baptist, remember last week, John the Baptist came in and questioned why John the Baptist's disciples and the Pharisees would fast, but Jesus' Pharisees weren't fasting. Sorry, Jesus' disciples. Thank you. I'm open to correction, by the way. It's been one of those days. And Jesus plainly says, why would the wedding guests be mourning when the bridegroom is still with him? And he introduces this hint at the new covenant that he's ushering in, or he's going to usher in through the shedding of his blood. So that's kind of where we pick up tonight in verse 18. Because while he was saying these things, so while he's explaining these things to John the Baptist's disciples, while he is saying these things to them, behold, a ruler came in and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live." And Jesus rose and followed him with his disciples. It's so easy, guys, to start to read through some of these accounts. It's just like factual events that happened, and miss the little nuggets that are all in here. Because several things are happening here I want us to take notice of. First of all, this ruler, this is more than likely, according to other Gospels, Mark and Luke, this is a ruler in the synagogue. And so this is not a Roman ruler. This is not a political figure. This is a religious leader. And he comes in with his daughter already dead. And what I noticed as I read through these different accounts we're going to cover tonight, with the healings that happened, every single person pursued Jesus with everything they had. And so what stood out to me in this is, again, this is not a formula for us to follow so we'll get healing. This is a picture, a physical picture of what we should be doing, what God desires for us to do spiritually. He desires for us to pursue him with everything we have. So this daughter has already died, and this faith-filled father comes in seeking the only one that can help. That's his problem in that moment. How do we respond in our moments of desperation? This father has left all logic behind. His daughter was already dead. How many of us would have just said, it's too late? He rejects the current state that his daughter is in. We'll read here in a little bit, they've already brought in the flute players and the mourners to help the family mourn. He worships Jesus. It's interesting. This is while they were saying these things, behold, a ruler came in and knelt before him. My daughter has just died, but come lay your hand on her and she will live. How is that worshiping Jesus? It is believing him for who he says he is. We go through our lives every day. Do we believe him? Do we worship him in our lives? Living out our life for him every day, believing him for who he says he is and who he says we are in him? Do we do that? That's the biggest way we come to worship him every single day. We show up here on a Wednesday night to sing songs to him. That's great. That's not the only form of worship. That's just one kind. I really enjoy it. I like music. Don't get me wrong. I'm a little biased about the singer, but she's my wife for the visitors. But that's one form of worship. He worshiped him by what he believed and proclaimed. Here's the other thing. How does Jesus respond to his worship? He receives it by turning and following him. Him receiving that worship talks about the truth of his deity. Jesus is not a man. Not just a man, I should say. He's not the Son of God, just the Son of God, as some religions would point out. He's not somebody that used to be Michael the Archangel. He is the Son of God, and he is God in the flesh. Amen. But there's an interruption. So dad comes in, my daughter's died, please come with me if you just lay your hands on her. I know she'll live. Jesus follows her, but he's interrupted with another familiar story of healing. In verse 20, it says, "And behold, a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. For she said to herself, if I only touch his garment, I will be made well. Jesus turned and seeing her, said, Take heart, daughter. Your faith has made you well. And instantly the woman was made well." There's more to this story. Matthew's very succinct in telling like minimal details. So I want to pick up a few things from Mark 5. It says, "And there is a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had." This woman had nothing to her name. In fact, it says that it even made it worse, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed from her disease. Here's the thing. This woman has been an outcast for 12 years. Can you imagine that? That's like worse than being a homeless person in downtown, because you can still kind of go wherever you want to go and do pretty much what you want to do, what you can do. She has to be banished. She's ceremonially unclean for 12 years. She's spent everything that she had. She's cut off from her family. 12 years. And she's so desperate that she risks touching somebody else and making them unclean to press through a crowd to try and get to Jesus. And she touches the hem of his prayer shawl, is what she touched. Now, there's nothing magical about the prayer shawl. And this is why I keep repeating, this is not a formula. There are people that would want to keep the disciples' bones around because they thought they had magical powers, and at times they did. But it wasn't the bones. It was the God that they served. And so I don't want anybody to look at a situation and go, well, if I just do X, Y, and Z, then A will happen. It's not like that. The only thing lacking in a healing situation, other than God and his power, is our faith. And that doesn't guarantee healing. She wasn't defaulting to an inferior procedure. She was attempting to not defile Jesus as well. If I can just touch the hem of his robe, I won't make Jesus unclean. But it was her faith that healed her, and Jesus wanted her to know that. And he called her by her honored title, daughter. Think about that phrase, that one word coming from Jesus Christ himself to somebody that's been shut off from humanity for 12 years. Could you imagine what it would feel like to be welcomed? He proclaimed her healing. He proclaimed her clean to where she could then go and rejoin her family and rejoin her life. But he called her by who she was, and that was his daughter, because of her faith. Jesus continues down the road. And when Jesus came to the ruler's house, he saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion. And the culture in this day, we need to understand this is not like today. Bud right now, he's surrounded by a ton of family. I said, if you need me down there, I will be there. We'll figure out tonight. And he goes, I've got plenty of people around me. In this day and age, even the poorest of people would hire at least 2 flute players and 1 mourner to come and mourn. And there's no confirmation that that's what's happening here other than the people's attitude. If you look at what happens here, it says, and he said, go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping. And so they turn from mourning and playing their flutes for this girl that's died, and they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl arose. And the report of this went through all the district. They went from mourning to ridiculing Jesus Christ. They had no faith. They did not recognize him for who he was or what he could do. The father's faith caused him to pursue Jesus for healing his daughter. It was public because of the ruler and Jesus kicking out the band. So there's a commotion that happened. And the news result was it spread all throughout, which leads us to the next story. This is what David Guzik says about this situation. Jesus didn't raise every dead child he encountered, but Jesus did so here in a simple act of mercy and compassion for the grieving father. In addition, Jesus must have hated death.
Gosh. And its cause. And enjoyed the opportunity
to hand death a small defeat before he would defeat it altogether at the cross. And as Jesus passed on from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying aloud, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." And when he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" And they said to him, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, be it done to you." And their eyes were opened, and Jesus sternly warned them, "See that no one knows about it." But they went away and spread his fame through all that district. Just like in the other 2 accounts, these 2 men followed Jesus. They're blind. How are they following him? They're probably having to ask, did he go this way? I can still hear his voice. Can you imagine trying to follow somebody that holds your healing in his hands, in his possession? He has the ability to do it, and you're chasing after him. God, that's what he wants us to do spiritually. Go back to the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. These guys, they realized that they were poor in their eyesight. But they didn't just realize they were blind. They didn't even ask for healing. They said, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." Guys, he's proclaiming Jesus Christ as the Messiah there, or they are. Because you don't go around saying Son of David. Everybody knows that the Messiah was going to come through the line of David. So to call some random guy Son of David hundreds of years later, you're proclaiming the Messiah. And they're risking doing that in public because the Pharisees had already started to scrutinize and come down on anybody that would do that. And so they think that that's why they went into the house to where it wouldn't be as public.
God is full of mercy, too. Son of David.
These men full of faith had to follow. They had to cry out. Have you ever hoped for something so much that you feared not getting it? Have you ever thought about that? Something you were so desperate for, something that you just can't imagine living without, or if you had it, it would just change your world. But even in the moment to think about crying out, there's this question, this doubt of what if it doesn't happen? These men had to have faith to cry out. They had faith when they cried out, Son of David. But they asked for what I think they truly knew that they needed, and that was his mercy. Spurgeon says this, their sole appeal was to mercy. There was no talk about merit, no pleading of their past sufferings or their persevering endeavors or their resolves for the future, but have mercy on us. He will never win a blessing from God who demands it as if he had a right to it. Jesus, wanting to be not so public, and invites them into a private setting. And he asks them this question, do you believe that I am able to do this? He's asking them if they have faith. Do you believe that I am who I say I am and I can do what God can do, what only God can do? Contrast that with chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, when Jesus says, they say, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean again. Like I said, there's no magic formula. Faith in Jesus' will, only one of which we have any control over. According to your faith, let it be done. They had faith that Jesus was able to heal them, and they had faith to ask for healing and say, yes, Lord. He then encounters a demon-possessed man. We covered demon possession a few weeks ago, and it was God's or Jesus' opportunity, God, Jesus, same thing, to reveal his authority and dominion over the spirit world, the fallen angels. And here he's got another opportunity. It's an interesting one because the last one, these guys had no clothes on and everybody was scared of them and they were violent. Here it says, and as they were going away, behold, a demon-possessed man who was mute was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the mute man spoke, and the crowds marveled, saying, never was anything like this seen in Israel. But the Pharisees said, he casts out demons by the prince of demons. Now, it's in the culture in that day, rabbis believed that if they could call out the name or find out the name of the demon, it was like having a grip on that demon and they could exorcise that demon. It's just one of their theories. It's interesting that this man was mute. The demon made the man mute where he couldn't state his name and seemingly thwart any efforts to cast him out, but that didn't stop Jesus. And the crowds marveled. Two contrasting views here. The crowds marveled, the Pharisees condemned. Tells you where their hearts were at. And that moves us into the last bit of this chapter. It says, and Jesus went through all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest field. So we come off the contrast of marveling and condemning. And Jesus goes in and preaches the gospel that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and he heals everybody. And yet there's still a problem. If you remember at the beginning of this chapter, he came to solve a different problem other than people's physical ailments, although he healed them. He came to heal our sin problem. And here he is looking out on the multitudes, and what does he see? He sees people that are harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Do you ever think about the fact that the people around us that don't know Jesus, do we see them as that? Do we see them as harassed? Do we see them as helpless? It's interesting, a lot of the people that we encounter, maybe, I don't know what your experience is, but my experience is they act like they don't want a shepherd. They act like, I don't need God, but they were made to need a shepherd. They have no comprehension that that's how God designed them, and they actually want it. They crave it. But they don't recognize it as God, and so they chase after other things. Describing these people as harassed, we know what the word harassed means in our English language, but when you delve into it, what the actual meaning of the Greek terminology is, it means to trouble oneself. You think about the people that are out there that don't know Jesus Christ, that are following the ways of the world, they bring trouble on themselves. The state that they are in is because of the sin nature that they have, but also the trouble that they choose to pursue. They have troubled themselves. The harassment that they are experiencing is self-inflicted. And helpless. In the NASB, it actually uses the word dispirited, which means thrown down. The people around us that don't have faith in Jesus Christ, they are troubled by their own situation, and they are thrown down. And they think it's just all about a big party. How many of us were there at one point in our life? Right? The 1828 Noah Webster Dictionary describes helpless as without help in oneself, destitute of the power or means to succor or relieve oneself. A person is rendered helpless by weakness or want of means. Guys, in our state that we were in before we came to Christ, if we've made that decision, if we are His, when He found us, how did He find us? He found us helpless. He found us without any way to fix our situation. And guys, how did He look on you? How did He look on me? He looked on me with compassion. He looked at me destroying my family for 8 years in addiction. And he didn't look on me with condemnation. I'm already condemned because I don't have Him, or I didn't. Okay? He looked on me with compassion. And that's how He looks at the multitudes. And as this resonated within me as I was preparing this, guys, whether we like it or not, God has planted us here. So, well, I could get a job somewhere else and move. You're going to encounter the same problem there. What are you doing and what am I doing as a witness for Jesus Christ here today with the people that God puts in our path and surrounds us with? Are we going to look out at them and all of their diversity, where they're from, how they dress, who they vote for, whatever? How are we going to look at them? Are we going to look at them in condemnation and judgment, or are we going to look at them with compassion? Because you can go to somebody with the truth of the gospel, or at least a part of the truth of the gospel, with zero compassion and just be beating people over the head. Or you can go to them with compassion in our hearts with the full gospel that Jesus loves them and offer them the hope of the gospel. As Steve read earlier, Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and He saves the crushed in spirit." That's where I found myself 21 years ago. I don't have to tell the story 2,000 times. I've probably told it a couple of hundred anyway. brokenhearted. How do you look at the people around you? Do you have compassion for them? This word that is used for compassion it's actually a really long Greek word, and don't ask me to pronounce it because I can't. But it is the deepest, most gut-wrenching feeling that one can have. It actually comes from one's bowels, the deep recesses of a person. This is the deepest level of compassion a person can possibly feel. And this is the God of the universe having it for us. He says the famous line that harvest is plentiful, but the workers, the laborers are few. Spurgeon says this about this. He says, pretenders were many, but real laborers in the harvest were few. Man-made ministries are useless. Still are the fields encumbered with gentlemen who cannot use a sickle. Still the real ingatherers are few and far between. Where are the instructive soul-winning ministries? We are challenged to pray to the Father, to ask Him. He challenged the disciples of this. He challenges us this through His Word. Pray that to the Lord of the harvest to send laborers into His harvest field. We should be praying that. We should also be the laborers. So I'm not a preacher. You should be. My role here is pastor teacher. But we all preach with our lives. What are you preaching? What I loved about Laura is she preached Jesus Christ and where her hope was. And she let everybody know, and she was not bashful about it. But she did it in love. She lived well. She also finished well. I said this a while back. I honestly believe that it takes more faith to finish well than it does to be healed. Are you willing to pray to the Father to ask Him to send you personally? Are you willing to make that step? People are seeking the spiritual healing that only Jesus can bring. And yes, Jesus could probably just snap His fingers and reveal it all to them. But He chose 2,000 years ago to place it in our hands. The church. He gave that assignment to us to be His witnesses. These people pursued Him with everything they had so they could seek the healing that they wanted, that they desired more than anything. This is before He went to the cross and died and finished the work. But they had faith in Him. He desires for us to seek Him the same way in everything that we do with our lives as we're conformed to Him more and more every day. Our reluctance at times as believers, as we look out on the people around us, to want to be used of Him as we see them, and we see them rejecting the Lord or seemingly rejecting the Lord, and we judge them before we allow God to move us to compassion for them. This last passage I'm going to cover, it may seem a little bit out of place. But it's a call that the Lord gave Isaiah to give to the nation of Israel in Isaiah 50, verses 10 and 11. The first verse highlights the righteous. It says, who among you fears the Lord and obeys the voice of his servant? Let him who walks in darkness and has no light trust in the name of the Lord and rely on his God. Guys, there's people out there, we know them, who are walking in darkness right now. There may be people in this room that are walking in darkness right now. God knows your heart. I don't. But if they would trust in the Lord, he would save them. If you had met me 22 years ago, I might have been kind of a friendly guy, but I would not be the man that you see today. Just ask my wife. Let's keep reading. This is what we see the majority of the world doing. This is probably what you and I were doing before we met the Lord. It says, behold, all you who kindle a fire, who equip yourselves with burning torches. The key words here is you're kindling the fire. You're equipping yourselves with the torches. Walk by the light of your fire. In other words, I'm a person and I'm trying to make my own way because I'm not trusting in the Lord. By the torches that you have kindled, this you have from my hand. You shall lie down in torment. Why in the world do I wrap it up with that? This is the reality of what's waiting for the people that God has given us the assignment to deliver the gospel to. I was thinking about this back there as I was thinking about Laura and how we mourn because we're separated from her now. There's a grief there. There's a sadness. That's another human being. The hell and the torment that people in hell are going to experience is not just the fire that is burning them but won't kill them. It is the fact that they will be separated for eternity from God. The people in our lives that are stoking their own torches, depending on their own line, we have been called to have compassion on. Here's the kicker. It's hard for me to have compassion when I am pursuing my own interests in my own life. Unless I am going to chase after God with everything that I have little chance that I'm going to have the compassion for these people that he's called me to have. My plea with you is chase after Jesus with everything you have. Let's pray.